The conference room on Orbital Station Theta 7 was cold and sterile. Like most places built by aliens who breathed different air and felt different temperatures. Corporal Li Taiyang stood at attention near the doorway, his rifle held across his chest in the standard guard position. He had been standing there for 3 hours now, watching aliens argue about mining rights and territorial boundaries. His legs didn't hurt. His back didn't ache. 3 hours was nothing for a human marine. Ambassador Park Jiwoo sat at the circular table, her hands folded calmly in front of her. She wore the dark blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, and her face showed no emotion as she listened to the Chitris commander rant about human arrogance. Around the table sat representatives from a dozen different species. Some had scales, some had feathers, and some had skin that looked like wet rubber. They all watched the argument with nervous eyes. Commander Velthrock was an insectoid creature, standing nearly 8 feet tall when he rose from his seat. His exoskeleton was dark green and shiny, covered in places by ceremonial armor that marked his rank. Forearms gestured wildly as he spoke, and his mandibles clicked together between words. 2 of his bodyguards stood behind him, equally large and equally armored. The other 2 guards stood near the walls, watching everyone with multifaceted eyes that saw in directions humans couldn't imagine. "Your species has no right to claim 3 systems," Velthrock said, his translator device turning his clicking sounds into harsh words. "You have been part of the Galactic Assembly for only 15 cycles. 15, my people have been traveling the stars for 3,000 cycles. We deserve those mining rights, not some primitive species that barely knows how to build a warp drive." Ambassador Park smiled softly. It wasn't a friendly smile. "Commander, the 3 systems in question are within 2 light-years of Earth's outer colonies. Under galactic law, specifically Article 12, Section 4, any species has territorial rights to all systems within 5 light-years of their established colonies. We're not claiming something that belongs to you. We're keeping what's already ours." Velthrock's mandibles clicked rapidly, sign of anger that Taiyang had learned to recognize during his 6 months on station duty. The commander's 4 hands curled into fists. Around the table, the other aliens shifted in their seats. A bird-like creature with blue feathers tucked her head down. A slug-like being oozed backward slightly. They all knew something bad was about to happen. "You dare quote law at me?" Velthrock's voice rose higher. "Your kind doesn't understand law. You're from a Deathworlde, a planet so hostile that you had to become monsters just to survive. You eat dead flesh. You breathe poison that would kill most civilized species. You've spent your entire history killing each other in thousands of wars. And now you think you can sit at this table and tell me, a commander of the Chitris Empire, what my people deserve?" Taiyang's jaw tightened. His grip on his rifle didn't change, but inside his head, training protocols activated. Hostile language. Escalating aggression. Possible threat. He ran through the scenarios quickly. If Velthrock attacked Ambassador Park, Taiyang would need to cross 7 meters of open space. Velthrock's 4 bodyguards would react. The plasma rifles they carried could fire in 0.8 seconds. Taiyang's kinetic rifle could fire in 0.3 seconds. His sidearm could clear the holster in 0.2 seconds. His vibroblade was always ready. Ambassador Park remained calm. She had dealt with angry aliens before. "Commander, I understand you're frustrated. But Earth's position is supported by galactic law and by the Assembly's own courts. If the Chitris Empire wishes to challenge our territorial claims, you're welcome to file a formal complaint with the Judicial Council. Until then, those 3 systems remain under human control." Something in Velthrock broke. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was generations of his species believing they were superior to everyone else. Maybe it was just rage at being told no by creatures he saw as primitives. Whatever it was, it made him do something incredibly stupid. He moved faster than most of the aliens in the room expected. His species were ambush predators on their homeworld, and despite their size, they could strike like lightning. Velthrock crossed the space between his seat and Ambassador Park in 2 long strides. But he didn't strike her. That would have been an act of war, an assault on a protected diplomat that even his empire couldn't ignore. Instead, he struck her guard. Velthrock's upper right arm swung in a wide arc. and his closed fist connected with the side of Tai Yang's face. The impact sounded like a hammer hitting meat. Tai Yang's head snapped to the left, and his vision exploded with white light. He tasted copper in his mouth. Blood began running from his split lower lip. The room went absolutely silent. Even the quiet hum of the air recyclers seemed to stop. Every alien in the room stared at what had just happened. Some of them knew enough about galactic law to understand that Velthrock had just made a terrible mistake. Physical assault of military personnel was treated differently than civilian assault. It was considered an act of aggression, a threat of violence that military members were authorized to respond to with immediate force. Tai Yang's head stayed turned to the left for a moment. His eyes were closed. Blood dripped from his chin onto the polished floor. The aliens waited. They expected him to fall down, or to cry out, or to call for help. That's what civilized species did. That's what the soft-bodied prey species did when predators struck them. Slowly, so very slowly, Tai Yang turned his head back to face forward. His eyes opened. They weren't filled with tears or fear or pain. They were empty, cold, like looking into deep space where nothing lived. His right hand, still holding the rifle, didn't move, but his left hand began drifting down toward the sidearm on his hip. The movement was smooth, practiced, inevitable. Ambassador Park watched her guard. She had served in the diplomatic corps for 12 years. Before that, she had served in the Korean Army for 8 years. She knew what that empty look in Tai Yang's eyes meant. She knew what would happen in the next few seconds. And she made a decision that would change how the galaxy saw humanity forever. She spoke one word in Korean, her native language. The language Tai Yang had grown up speaking in the streets of Seoul before Earth became a spacefaring civilization. The word was simple and clear. Proceed. Tai Yang's hand closed around the grip of his sidearm. Commander Velthrock's mandibles spread wide as he finally understood what was about to happen. His 4 hands reached for his own weapon. His bodyguards saw the movement and began activating their energy shields. Reaching for their plasma rifles, they were all too slow. Humans didn't come from a peaceful world where problems were solved with words and patience. They came from Earth, where hesitation meant death, where every other species on the planet wanted to eat them, or poison them or kill them in 1,000 creative ways. They came from a world where only the fastest, the strongest, the most ruthless survived to have children. Evolution had carved away everything soft in humanity, and left behind something that the galaxy was about to see for the first time. Tai Yang drew his weapon. 5 seconds. That's all it would take. 5 seconds for the galaxy. The first bodyguard died before his energy shield fully formed. Tai Yang's sidearm cleared the holster and fired in one smooth motion. The kinetic round, a simple piece of metal accelerated to hypersonic speed, punched through the gap in the forming energy barrier. Most species in the galaxy had abandoned kinetic weapons centuries ago. Energy shields stopped lasers and plasma bolts easily. But a physical projectile, that was different. The shield tried to form around it, but momentum didn't care about energy fields. The bullet hit the bodyguard's thorax, right where the main neural cluster sat, protected by chitin armor. Except the armor was designed to disperse energy, not stop solid impacts. The round went through the exoskeleton like it was paper, and the bodyguard dropped instantly, all 4 of his arms going limp. 1 second, the other 3 bodyguards reacted fast. They were trained warriors, veterans of a dozen campaigns across the galaxy. Their plasma rifles came up, and their fingers found triggers. But they aimed where Tai Yang had been standing, not where he was going. Humans were pursuit predators. They didn't stand still and trade blows. They moved, constantly, unpredictably. Tai Yang dove forward and to the left, his body sliding across the polished conference table. Plasma bolts scorched the air where he had been, hitting the wall behind his position and melting burn marks into the metal. The alien delegates screamed and threw themselves to the floor. Ambassador Park simply tilted her chair backward and let gravity take her down. Completely calm as death flew overhead. 2 seconds. Tai Yang came off the table on the far side, his boots hitting the floor in a combat crouch. The second bodyguard was right there, turning to track him with the plasma rifle. Too slow. Taiyang's left hand shot out and grabbed the rifle barrel, pushing it up toward the ceiling. His right hand, still holding his sidearm, came up under the alien's mandibles. He didn't shoot. At this range, the round might overpenetrate and hit the delegates cowering behind overturned chairs. Instead, Taiyang dropped his sidearm and grabbed the bodyguard's head with both hands. Human grip strength was insane by galactic standards, developed from millions of years of climbing trees and throwing spears and strangling prey. His fingers found purchase on the smooth exoskeleton, and he twisted hard. The Chitris body structure had a weak point where the head connected to the thorax, a flexible joint that allowed for the rapid head movements their species used to track prey. Joint wasn't designed to handle rotational force from a creature that could generate over 100 kilograms of grip strength per hand. Something inside made a wet cracking sound. The bodyguard's forearm spasmed once and went still. Taiyang let the body fall. 3 seconds. The third bodyguard ran. It wasn't cowardice exactly. It was tactical retreat, trying to get distance to use his plasma rifle effectively. He made it 3 meters before Taiyang's combat knife caught him in the back. Humans were throwing specialists. Their ancestors had killed prey from a distance with rocks and spears, and that instinct remained. The knife rotated 3 times in the air, traveling 15 meters, and buried itself to the hilt between 2 segments of spinal armor. The Chitris nervous system was different from human, but the principle was the same. Sever the connection between brain and body, and nothing worked anymore. The third bodyguard crashed face first into the floor, and didn't move again. 4 seconds. Commander Velthrock finally got his personal shield activated. It was military grade, stronger than what his bodyguards carried, designed to stop sustained fire from multiple weapons. The blue energy barrier hummed into existence around his body. He raised his own plasma pistol, mandibles clicking in what might have been fear or rage or both. Taiyang had already analyzed the problem. Personal shields had 3 weaknesses. First, they couldn't stop slow-moving objects, or the user couldn't interact with the world. Second, they drew enormous power and couldn't stay active for more than a few minutes. Third, and most important, the generator was always outside the shield because it generated too much heat to keep inside. Taiyang picked his sidearm up from where he'd dropped it and fired at his own gun. The bullet ricocheted off the kinetic-resistant grip at a calculated angle, hit the wall, bounced again, and struck Velthrock's shield generator on his belt. Trick shots weren't luck. They were geometry and practice. Human soldiers spent thousands of hours on the range, learning how bullets moved and how to make them go where they wanted through obstacles and around corners. The generator sparked and died. The blue shield vanished. Velthrock's eyes went wide, all 6 of them focusing on the human walking toward him. 5 seconds. Taiyang closed the distance in 3 long strides. His right hand dropped to his waist and drew the vibroblade from its sheath. The weapon was human technology, a monomolecular edge that vibrated at frequencies that let it cut through almost anything. Some species thought vibroblades were primitive compared to energy swords. Those species had never seen what a monomolecular edge could do in skilled hands. Velthrock tried to bring his plasma pistol around. He was still thinking like a civilized species, like someone who fought at range with technology. Taiyang was thinking like a human, like an ape that had climbed down from the trees and decided to kill everything on the planet that was bigger and stronger and better armed. The vibroblade moved in a horizontal arc. It went through Velthrock's neck with almost no resistance, cutting between armor plates and through the flexible tissue underneath. The commander's head separated from his body cleanly. It hit the floor and rolled, mandibles still clicking reflexively. The body stood for another second before the forelegs gave out, and it collapsed in a heap of armor and leaking blue blood. The last bodyguard, the 4th one who had been standing near the wall, dropped his weapon and raised all 4 arms in surrender. Taiyang looked at him for a long moment. The empty coldness in his eyes slowly faded, replaced by something more human. He nodded once and lowered his vibroblade. The fight was over. The entire engagement had lasted 5 seconds. 5 seconds from the moment Tai Yang drew his weapon to the moment Commander Velthrock's head hit the floor. In that time, 4 armored alien warriors and 1 commander of the Chitris military had died. The human hadn't taken a single hit beyond the original slap. He hadn't even been breathing hard. Ambassador Park climbed to her feet and brushed off her uniform. She looked at the carnage, at the blue blood pooling on the floor, at the alien delegates staring in absolute horror at what they'd just witnessed. She pulled out a small device from her pocket and activated the recording function. Every word she spoke now would be transmitted to Earth and to every embassy humanity maintained across the galaxy. "Let the record show," she said in a clear, calm voice, that Commander Velthrock of the Chitris Empire initiated physical assault against Corporal Lee Taiyang, a military service member in active duty, on this date at this location. Under Article 7 of the Galactic Law Code, physical assault of military personnel is classified as an act of aggression and permits immediate lethal response to neutralize the threat. Corporal Lee Taiyang exercised his lawful right to self-defense. Any complaints may be filed with the Galactic Judicial Council. She looked at the surviving bodyguard, who still had his arms raised. "You're free to go. Take your commander's body. Tell your empire what happened here today. Tell them that humans follow galactic law. But also tell them what happens when someone breaks that law against us." The bodyguard grabbed Velthrock's body and head and practically ran from the room. The other delegates remained frozen. They had thought humans were weak because they were soft-bodied and relatively small. They had thought kinetic weapons were primitive. They had thought Deathworlde species were just a curiosity, no different from any other species once they reached space. They were all wrong. And now, thanks to the security cameras that recorded everything in the conference room, the entire galaxy was about to find out just how wrong they were. Taiyang cleaned his vibroblade on a cloth from his pocket, sheathed it, and returned to his position by the door. His lip had stopped bleeding. He stood at attention, rifle across his chest, as if nothing had happened. Ambassador Park sat back down at the table. "Now then." The security footage reached the galactic network in less than 2 hours. Someone in the station's control center, maybe a low-level technician who wanted to make a quick credit, copied the file and uploaded it to every major news service in known space. By the time Earth's government could try to classify it or control the narrative, 17 billion beings across 400 worlds had already watched a human kill 5 armed aliens in 5 seconds. The video went viral in a way that nothing in galactic history ever had before. It was shared, analyzed, slowed down, and watched frame by frame. Experts from 100 different species studied every movement Taiyang made. They measured his reaction time, his accuracy, his speed. The numbers were terrifying. On the water world of Aquilus Prime, the Council of Currents gathered in their floating palace. The members were peaceful beings, their civilization built on meditation and harmony with the oceans. They watched the video in horrified silence. When it ended, the eldest counselor spoke through her translator implant. "This species cannot be allowed to spread unchecked. They're too dangerous. We must petition the Assembly to quarantine their space until we understand them better." But on the desert world of Kresh Major, home to the Reptarian warrior clans, the reaction was completely different. General Kormoth watched the video 7 times. Each time he noticed something new. The way the human moved with purpose, never wasting energy. The way he calculated angles for the ricochet shot. The cold efficiency of every kill. Magnificent. Kormoth said to his assembled officers, "This is what real combat looks like. Not the ceremonial duels we practice, not the honor-bound battles the Assembly preaches. This is survival warfare." He paused, his forked tongue tasting the air. "Pull every file we have on Earth. I want to know everything about human military capabilities. Everything. On Earth itself." In the command center deep beneath Geneva, Admiral Song Daeon stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching a wall of screens showing news feeds from across the galaxy. Some called for human expulsion from the Assembly. Some called for sanctions. Some called for military action against Earth, but many. The warrior species and the pragmatic species simply watched and said nothing. "Sir," said Commander Choi Minho, Taiyang's direct superior officer, "we're getting requests for interviews from 600 news organizations. Ambassador Park is being called to testify before the assembly, and the Chitras Empire has filed 17 separate complaints demanding Taiyang's immediate execution." Song Daeon nodded slowly. He was 60 years old, a veteran of Earth's unification wars, and he understood violence in a way most modern humans didn't. "What's the legal team saying?" "They say we're on solid ground, sir. Article 7 is clear. Physical assault of military personnel permits lethal response. Every precedent supports our position. It's precedent based on species who don't kill in 5 seconds, Song said. "The galaxy has never seen anything like us, Commander. They're not scared of our technology or our numbers. They're scared of what that video shows. A single human, with basic equipment, killing 5 armored enemies before most beings could even process what was happening." He turned to face Minho. "Let's deploy the 3rd and 5th fleets to defensive positions around our outer colonies. If the Chitras are stupid enough to start a war over this, I want to be ready on the Chitras' homeworld, a planet of towering hive cities and crystal forests." General Kresh stood before the Empress Mother herself. The ancient ruler was 3 times the size of a normal Chitras, having consumed royal jelly for 300 cycles. Her multifaceted eyes reflected the light of 100 ceremonial candles. "Commander Velthrock was a fool," the Empress Mother said, her voice like grinding stones. "He died because he underestimated a prey species. But his death must be avenged or we appear weak. The other empires watch to see how we respond." "Her Majesty Kresh said carefully, "The humans are dangerous. I've reviewed their history. They fought each other in conflicts spanning continents and lasting decades. They've survived plagues that killed billions, natural disasters that reshaped their planet, and they developed nuclear weapons before they achieved spaceflight. They armed themselves with the power to destroy their own world before they could leave it. Are you suggesting we show weakness?" The Empress Mother's mandibles clacked in displeasure. "I'm suggesting we show wisdom. We have 47 warships ready for deployment, but I don't know if that's enough. The humans have been very careful not to show their full military strength. We know they have at least 200 vessels, but intelligence suggests they may have built more. And if their ships fight like their soldiers..." Krish let the implication hang in the air. The Empress Mother was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke. "Deploy the fleet to the neutral zone. We demand justice through the Galactic Judicial Council. If the humans refuse to hand over their murderer, we take him by force. If they do hand him over, we execute him publicly and show the galaxy that striking the Chitras has consequences." Her eyes fixed on Krish. "But General, prepare for the possibility that we've started something we cannot finish." In the Grand Assembly Hall on Galactic Prime, Counselor Yoon Sora stood at the speaking podium. Surrounded by the floating seats of 300 representatives from every member species, the chamber was designed to show equality with every seat at the same height and distance from the center. But today, it felt like Yoon was standing in an arena, with predators circling the speaker. A towering crystalline being whose species had founded the assembly 8,000 cycles ago, raised one faceted appendage. "Counselor Yoon, humanity stands accused of excessive violence, of bringing Deathworlde savagery to civilized space. How do you respond?" Yoon took a breath. She'd been a lawyer before becoming a counselor, and she knew how to argue a case. "Speaker, honored representatives, we respond with facts and law. Commander Velthrock physically assaulted a human military service member in front of witnesses. Under Article 7, Corporal Lee Taeyang had every legal right to defend himself. That defense resulted in 5 deaths. Yes, but those deaths occurred because Velthrock's bodyguards drew weapons and engaged in combat. Corporal Lee neutralized the threats. That's not murder. That's survival." A representative from the avian worlds, her blue feathers ruffled in agitation, spoke up. 5 deaths in 5 seconds. How is that proportional? How is that civilized? How is slapping someone's face civilized? Yoon shot back. Commander Velthrock started this. He chose violence. The fact that he chose violence against a species better at violence than his own doesn't make it our fault. Another representative. This one from a species that looked like floating jellyfish, drifted forward. But this reveals a disturbing truth about humanity. You're too dangerous. Your evolution on that Deathworlde made you into killers. Perhaps the Assembly made a mistake accepting you as members. Yoon felt anger rise in her chest, but she forced it down. Anger wouldn't help. Facts would. You're right, she said, and the chamber went silent. Earth is a Deathworlde. Category 9, on the danger scale, one of the most hostile planets known to harbor intelligent life. Everything on our planet evolved to survive in conditions that would kill most of you in minutes. High gravity, extreme weather, aggressive megafauna, poisonous plants, and a history of ice ages, asteroid impacts, and supervolcano eruptions. She paused, letting that sink in. But here's what you're missing. We survived all of that. Not by being the strongest, or the fastest, or the most poisonous. We survived by being smart, adaptable, and yes, by being very, very good at violence when we needed to be. Every species in this chamber comes from worlds where cooperation was the key to survival. We come from a world where hesitation meant extinction. That doesn't make us evil. It makes us human. The speaker's crystalline body chimed softly, a sign of deep thought. The Judicial Council will convene an emergency tribunal. Corporal Lee Taeyong will be summoned to testify. If his actions are found to violate galactic law, he will face punishment. If they are found legal, then this matter is closed, and the Chitras Empire must accept the council's judgment. Yoon bowed her head in agreement. But as she left the chamber, she received a message on her secure com. It was from Admiral Song. The message was simple. Chitra's fleet moving toward our space. Prepare for war. Across the galaxy, the debate raged. News networks ran constant coverage. Scientists analyzed human physiology and tried to explain how such soft creatures could be so deadly. Military strategists war-gamed conflicts with Earth and didn't like their projections. And ordinary citizens, from 1,000 different worlds, looked at that video and realized something that changed their understanding of the universe. Humanity had joined the galaxy 15 cycles ago as the newest, youngest species. Everyone had assumed they would learn to be civilized, to move beyond their violent past. But now, the galaxy understood the truth. Humans hadn't left their violence behind when they reached the stars. The Grand Judicial Chamber was carved from a single piece of white stone that supposedly came from the first planet the Assembly had colonized together. 8,000 cycles ago, the walls curved upward into a dome that showed holographic projections of space, reminding everyone present that justice should be as infinite and impartial as the stars themselves. Corporal Lee Taeyang stood in the center of the chamber, wearing his dress uniform with all medals removed as protocol required. Around him, in a circular arrangement, sat the 9 judges of the High Council. Each represented a different type of species: predator, prey hive mind, individual, carbon-based, silicon-based, aquatic, aerial, and the ancient crystalline beings who served as tiebreakers. High Magistrate Thelquan, the crystalline judge, sat highest among them. His body refracted light into rainbow patterns as he moved. This tribunal will determine if Corporal Lee Taeyang's actions constitute legal self-defense under Article 7, or if they represent excessive force that violates the Assembly's prohibition on disproportionate violence. Prosecutor, present your case. Prosecutor Velsanis stepped forward. He was Chitras, like the dead commander, but smaller and built for thinking rather than fighting. His forearms gestured as he spoke. Honored judges, the facts are not in dispute. Commander Velthrock struck the defendant once. A single slap. In response, the defendant killed 5 beings, including a high-ranking military commander. This is not self-defense. This is murder disguised as justice. He activated a holographic display that showed the security footage. The judges watched as Taeyang moved through the fight. Velsanis paused it at key moments. Notice here the defendant has already killed 3 beings. The threat is neutralized. Yet he continues. He calculates a ricochet shot to disable Commander Velthrock's shield. He closes for a killing blow when he could have simply restrained or disabled him. This is not defense. This is execution. Velsanus turned to face Taiyang directly. The defendant is a trained killer from a world so violent that warfare is their primary cultural activity. Humans have fought each other for their entire history. They've developed thousands of ways to kill, and they teach these methods to every soldier. The defendant didn't see a slap. He saw an excuse to do what his kind does best, kill. Defense advocate Han Yemen stood. He was human, one of the few lawyers Earth had trained in galactic law during their short time in the Assembly. Prosecutor Velsanus presents opinion, not fact. Yes, Earth has a violent history. Every species does. The Reptarians fought territorial wars for 5,000 cycles. The Aquatic Collective had a civil war that lasted 3 generations. Even the peaceful avians had a period called the Talon Wars. Violence is not unique to humanity. He walked to the center, standing beside Taiyang. What happened in that conference room was not execution. It was combat survival. When Commander Velthrock struck Corporal Lee, he didn't just slap him. He demonstrated hostile intent. Velthrock's bodyguards immediately reached for weapons. 5 armed combatants versus 1? Corporal Lee did what any soldier would do. He neutralized the threat before it could kill him or the civilians in the room, including Ambassador Park. The aquatic judge, her body floating in a sphere of water, bubbled a question that her translator rendered into words. But why kill? Why not disable? Most species would have sought to restrain, not destroy. Han Yemen had prepared for this. With respect, honored judge, most species don't come from worlds where restraining a threat means death. On Earth, if you try to wrestle a predator instead of killing it, you die. If you hesitate when attacked, you die. Humans evolved with threat response patterns that prioritize immediate, overwhelming action because anything less means becoming prey. He brought up his own display showing neurological scans. Captain Omingi, our expert in human combat psychology, will explain this better than I can. But the simple version is this. Human brains are wired to assess threats and respond with maximum force to ensure survival. It's not cruelty. It's biology. Captain Omingi took the stand. She was 40 years old, with gray streaking her black hair, and she'd spent 2 decades studying how human soldiers processed combat. Honored judges, when a human perceives lethal threat, our amygdala triggers a cascade of neurological responses. Adrenaline floods the system. Heart rate increases. Time perception slows. In the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that handles complex decision-making, partially shuts down in favor of faster, more primitive responses. She highlighted sections of a brain scan. In that moment, Corporal Lee wasn't thinking, how can I proportionally respond to this situation? He was thinking 5 hostiles, all armed, protect the principal. His training and instincts took over. And his training says, neutralize threats immediately and completely. Don't wound and hope they stop. Don't restrain and hope they don't break free. Stop them permanently. Prosecutor Velsanus clicked his mandibles in annoyance. This just proves my point. Humans are too dangerous. Their biology makes them killers. They can't control themselves. That's not what I said, Captain O responded sharply. Corporal Lee was in complete control. Every move he made was precise, calculated. He didn't fire randomly. He didn't kill the 4th bodyguard who surrendered. He stopped the moment the threat ended. That's not lack of control. That's perfect control. The predator judge, a massive feline being with silver fur, leaned forward. But the prey judge's question remains. Why not disable? Shoot to wound, not kill. Taiyang spoke for the first time. His voice was calm, steady. Because shooting to wound is a myth, Your Honor. It doesn't exist in real combat. When you fire a weapon at someone, you're using lethal force. Where the bullet hits doesn't change that. Center mass shots are more likely to stop a threat quickly. Trying for a leg or an arm means missing entirely and endangering everyone else. So soldiers are trained. If you draw your weapon, you shoot to stop the threat. And stopping the threat means hitting center mass until they go down. The chamber was silent. Han Yumin spoke into that silence. Honored judges, we request that witness keeper Droken verify Corporal Lee's truthfulness. Droken was an empath, one of the rare species whose nervous systems could read emotional states in other beings. He approached Tai Yang and placed 3 tentacles against the human's temples. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Droken withdrew. This human speaks truth as he knows it, Droken said in his musical voice. When the commander struck him, he perceived genuine threat to himself and to the ambassador. He felt no hatred, no joy in killing, no malice, only cold calculation of survival. His regret is not for his actions, but for their necessity. Prosecutor Velsanis tried one more angle. Even if we accept that the corporal believed he was in danger, the response was still excessive. 1 slap does not justify 5 deaths. High Magistrate Thelquan's voice resonated through the chamber. Prosecutor, you misunderstand the law. Article 7 does not require proportional response. It permits military personnel to use appropriate force to neutralize threats. The question is not whether 5 deaths equal 1 slap. The question is whether Corporal Lee reasonably believed he and others were in danger, and whether his response was appropriate to end that danger. Han Yemen seized the opening. Exactly, honored magistrate. Commander Velthrock's bodyguards drew weapons. They fired on Corporal Lee. At that point, this wasn't about a slap anymore. It was about 5 armed combatants trying to kill a human soldier who was protecting a diplomat. The law is clear. He had the right to defend himself and others. The 9 judges conferred privately for an hour. The galaxy watched. Billions of beings waiting to see if humanity would be found guilty of murder, or if the assembly would acknowledge that different species had different survival strategies. When the judges returned, High Magistrate Thelquan spoke. We have reached a decision. Corporal Lee Taiyang's actions, while shocking to species unused to such rapid violence, do not violate galactic law. He acted in legal self-defense under Article 7. Commander Velthrock initiated physical assault. His bodyguards escalated to lethal force. The corporal responded appropriately to neutralize the threat. Thelquan's gaze swept across the chamber. However, this tribunal recognizes the Assembly's concern about human military capabilities. We recommend that all species educate themselves about Deathworlde psychology and combat doctrine. Misunderstandings like this one cost 5 lives. Let us ensure no more lives are lost to ignorance. He struck his crystalline gavel against the stone. Corporal Lee Taiyang is cleared of all charges. The Chitris Empire is directed to pay reparations to Earth for the assault on a military service member and for the initiation of hostilities. Prosecutor Velsanus' mandibles clacked in fury. This is not justice. This is the message came through on every device in the chamber simultaneously. General Kresh had just crossed into human space with 47 warships. The Chitris Empire had decided that legal decisions didn't matter. They wanted vengeance. The Battle of Proxima Junction began at 0600 hours Galactic Standard Time. 47 Chitris warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of human space, their weapons already charging and their shields at maximum. They came in a standard battle formation that had served the Chitris Empire for 300 cycles. Heavy cruisers in front, destroyers on the flanks, carriers in the rear launching fighter craft. General Kresh stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Vengeance of Queens, and watched the tactical display. His mandibles clicked in satisfaction as his sensors picked up the human defensive force. Only 12 ships. The humans had either underestimated the Chitris, or they simply didn't have enough vessels to defend their territory properly. Open a channel, Kresh ordered. Let them surrender before we have to destroy them. Fleet Commander Shin Borum received the message on the bridge of her flagship, the Soul's Fire. She was 38 years old, the youngest fleet commander in human history. She'd earned her position by thinking differently than everyone else. While other officers studied traditional naval tactics, she'd studied Earth's naval history, back when ships fought on water instead of in space. Admiral Song, she said into her comm. Permission to engage under Protocol 7? Back on Earth, in the command center, Admiral Song Daeon looked at the tactical display. 47 ships against 12. By conventional warfare standards, this should be a massacre. But he'd read Shin Boram's tactical proposals. He'd seen what she could do in simulations. And he knew that humans didn't fight conventional wars. Permission granted, Commander. Show them what Deathworlders can do. 8. Helmsman, all ships, activate Protocol 7. We're going to fight like Earth predators, not civilized spacers. The 12 human ships suddenly broke formation. Instead of arranging themselves in the standard defensive sphere that most species used, they scattered in 12 different directions. Their engines burned at accelerations that should have killed everyone aboard. 5 Gs, 6 Gs, 7. On the Chitris flagship, the tactical officer's eyes widened. General, the humans are accelerating at rates that should be fatal to soft-bodied species. Then they'll kill themselves before we have to, Kresh said. But something in his gut, the same instinct that had kept him alive through a dozen battles, told him this was wrong. The humans weren't running scared. They were hunting. The first human ship, a destroyer called Bizen's Wrath, came in from above the Chitris formation at an angle that no sane pilot would attempt. It was diving at 7 Gs of acceleration, its nose pointed directly at a Chitris heavy cruiser. The Chitris captain fired plasma torpedoes, but the human ship jinked sideways at the last second, pulled maneuvers that should have torn it apart, and got under the cruiser's shields at point-blank range. Bizen's Wrath fired its main railgun. The kinetic projectile, a 2-ton slug of tungsten accelerated to a fraction of light speed, punched through the cruiser's hull like it was paper. The ship's reactor went critical. The explosion took out 2 nearby destroyers. 3 Chitris ships gone in the first 30 seconds. What are they doing? Kresh shouted. They're flying like madmen. But they weren't mad. They were human. Every pilot in the fleet had grown up on a world with higher gravity than any Chitris could survive. 7 Gs was uncomfortable, but it wouldn't kill them. Their bodies were built to handle forces that would turn most aliens into paste. In their inner ears, their sense of balance was so good that they could handle spins and rolls that would make other species black out instantly. The soul's fire came in low and fast. Skimming through the debris field from the destroyed cruiser, Shin Boram watched her tactical display and called out orders. Weapons, fire missiles, full spread. Helm, get us into the formation. Marines prepare for boarding action. The Chitris had never seen tactics like this. Human ships didn't stay at safe distances and exchange fire. They dove into knife-fighting range, where shields were less effective and where their primitive kinetic weapons could do maximum damage. They used the debris from destroyed ships as cover, hiding behind chunks of metal that radar and sensors had trouble seeing through. Worse, they were learning. Every Chitris tactic, every formation change, the humans adapted to it within minutes. It was like fighting an enemy that could read your mind and predict your moves before you made them. Because humans had spent 10,000 years fighting each other in every environment imaginable, they'd developed strategies for land, sea, air, and space. They'd fought in deserts and jungles and frozen tundra and underwater. Adapting to new enemies was what they did best. The human frigate, Inchin Runner, used a tactic that made the Chitris crews hesitate in disbelief. It accelerated directly toward a Chitris destroyer, seemingly on a suicide run. The destroyer's captain held fire, assuming the human would veer off. Instead, Inchin Runner opened its cargo bay and ejected a cloud of ball bearings, each one moving at orbital velocity. The bearings shredded the destroyer's forward shields and hull. Before the Chitris could recover, Inchin Runner barrel rolled over the crippled ship and launched boarding pods. Human Marines, wearing powered armor and carrying those terrifying kinetic weapons, punched through the hull and began fighting inside the ship. The Chitris crew panicked. They'd trained for ship-to-ship combat, not for fighting in 0G against enemies who moved like demons. Human Marines could operate in vacuum, in toxic atmospheres, in temperature extremes that would kill unprotected Chitris in seconds. and they fought with a brutality that shocked species used to civilized warfare. One Marine, Sergeant Kim Hunwoo, led his squad through the destroyer's corridors. The Chitris defenders fired plasma weapons that could melt steel. Hyenwoo's armor took 3 direct hits and kept functioning. He returned fire with his rifle, and the kinetic rounds punched through bulkheads and armor like they were cloth. "Secure engineering," he ordered. "I want this ship's reactor intact. We're adding it to our fleet." On the Vengeance of Queens, General Kresh watched his formation fall apart. 23 ships destroyed. 18 crippled. 6 captured by human boarding parties. And the human fleet? 2 ships damaged. 0 destroyed. It was impossible. The Chitris had superior numbers, superior technology, superior firepower. But the humans fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. They took risks that should have killed them. They flew patterns that should have torn their ships apart. They adapted to every tactic in real time. "Fall back," Kresh ordered. "All ships retreat to the neutral zone." But Shin Borum wasn't done. "Pursue them. Don't let them regroup." The remaining human ships chased the Chitris fleet, harrying them like wolves chasing wounded prey. They didn't need to destroy every ship. They just needed to break the Chitris' will to fight. And they did. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 30 of the 47 Chitris ships were destroyed or captured. 15 had managed to escape back to Chitris space. 2 had surrendered intact. Human casualties: 143 dead, 400 wounded. Chitris casualties: over 30,000. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the battle. Recordings spread across the networks. Military academies would study this battle for generations. The humans had won not through superior technology or numbers, but through superior tactics, training, and sheer aggression. They fought like their world had taught them to fight, overwhelmingly, unpredictably, and without mercy. In the Galactic Assembly, an emergency session convened. Counselor Yunsora stood before the gathered representatives once again. But this time, no one questioned humanity's right to exist. They were too busy being terrified. Elder Counselor Zimroth, who had lived for 300 cycles and seen the rise and fall of a dozen empires, slowly rose from his seat. His ancient voice carried across the chamber. "I have seen this before, 3 times in my life. 3 times, a species from a Deathworlde joined the assembly. 3 times we civilized species made the same mistake." He gestured at the recordings of the battle playing on screens throughout the chamber. "We assumed that reaching space meant abandoning violence. We thought that any species capable of building starships must have moved beyond their primitive instincts. But Deathworldes don't work that way. Species that survive on peaceful worlds learn cooperation because resources are plentiful and predators are rare. Species that survive on Deathworldes learn to be unkillable because everything on their planet is trying to murder them." Zimroth looked directly at Yunsora. "Humans are not monsters. They are simply what happens when a planet spends 4 billion years trying to kill a species, and that species refuses to die. They brought their survival instincts to space because those instincts are what made them successful, and we should be grateful." "Grateful," someone shouted. "They just destroyed a fleet." "A fleet that attacked them first," Zimroth replied. "Imagine if the Chitris had succeeded. Imagine if they'd destroyed those 12 human ships and moved on to attack Earth's colonies. How many billions would have died? The humans didn't start this war, but they ended it quickly and decisively, with minimal loss of